Fantasy! Dungeons! Dragons! Fiefdoms? Fiefdom? What? What is Kingdom 2 mainstream now? So I was looking at this article by Chuck Wendig over at terribleminds.com, and it had some rules about writing fantasy, and personally, I found it pretty interesting. So interesting that I'm gonna go over and expand upon some of my favorite points. And I don't know, maybe slip in some references to other stories and media, because it's not like this is a college assignment or anything. Yeah, I know this sounds silly, but as I so cleverly wove in at the beginning, when most people think of fantasy, they think of dungeons and dragons and fiefdoms. Okay, what the heck does a fiefdom mean? Like, seriously, what is fiefdom? Let me just look this up really quick. A fief. But medieval Europe, knights and damsels, that's what fantasy is, right? Well, you're right. I mean, that is fantasy. It's just high fantasy. But high fantasy is only one subgenre in this giant umbrella of genres that exists within this genre. Wendig points out some of the other types, like dark fantasy, urban fantasy, paranormal fantasy. Even Twilight has somehow managed to make its own category. And if you don't believe me, then visit the YA section of basically any bookstore, and please tell me if it's not 75% vampire romance. I mean, seriously. But in my opinion, fantasy only has to meet one requirement. Yep, just one. And that is to have a plot element that is not scientifically possible. That's it. Because if it is scientifically possible either now or in the future, then, well, it's science fiction, not fantasy. Though I have heard through the grapevine that there is this science fantasy genre that's coming through the woodworks, but, well, I'm gonna pretend it doesn't exist to make my point. Like all good persuaders do. Yeah, that's not a famous quote or anything, I just totally made that up. Sounds totally legit, right? Screw you guys. When planning out your fantasy world, before you raiseth your mighty sword and say, remember that all good fantasy is rooted in reality. Whoa, dude, slow down. I can't take all these oxymorons. I know, but it's okay, we're gonna get through this. As Wendig said, we the audience live in reality. Well, maybe you don't, but we do. So you have to make sure that there's something recognizable going on in your story. How do you do this, you ask? Mirrors! Yeah, mirrors. And no, I don't mean like the physical kind of mirror. I mean that your book should mirror lots of current events. Social norms, real-world opinions, even real people. Mirror those in your book. A good example of this would be the Miyazaki movie Princess Mononoke. Where they have that whole society of boars and they have to fight stubbornly to protect the forest and prove that they're still superior to humans? Gee, that sounds a lot like the power struggle throughout history, you might say. And that's because you're absolutely right, little annoying voice I just made up. And if political stances can influence a tribe of giant spirit pigs in a Japanese animated movie, just imagine what it can do for your story. World building is a necessary evil that goes along with fantasy, right? I mean, sure, it's fun to sit around all day and think about what powers your half-cat, half-moon fairy person has, but what about the society of these fairy cat people? Where do they live? Are they a free or controlling people? What do they do with their enemies? Is there anything they can do with their powers that's looked upon by society as bad? Do they interact with humans? Are humans even in their world? Are they the superior race? I don't know any of these things, but you need to. Sure, research is scary, and you might have to actually look at something other than Wikipedia.
The horror. The horror. The horror.
Don't worry, you'll thank me later. And now it's time for Reading with Rose. Okay, that was a silly announcer voice. But yeah, today's book is His Majesty's Dragon by Naomi Novik. I probably pronounced that horribly wrong, so I apologize. Is it a dragon egg then? Lawrence said. It required an effort to restrain the triumph in his voice. Yes indeed, Captain. The size of the egg shows that. Mr. Pillett wiped his hands on his apron and was already brushing more straw away from the top, trying to see the extent. My, it is quite hardened already. I wonder what they can have been thinking, so far from land. This did not sound promising. Hardened? Lawrence said sharply. What does that mean? Why, that it will hatch soon. I will have to consult my books to be certain, but I believe that Badkey's Beastery states with authority that when a shell is fully hardened, hatching will occur within a week. What a splendid specimen. I must get my measuring cords. Okay, so just from that excerpt you can tell one thing straight off the bat. She did her research, and it's not because this book is historical fantasy. Well, okay, it's not just because this book is historical fantasy. But I can tell just from the conversation about this dragon egg that somewhere on her computer she has 50 plus pages of Word docs. You know, the kind that take hundreds of hours to make and it just ends up being a jumbled mess of bullet points that probably only she can decipher? And you know what? That's what makes fantasy great. I don't doubt anything these people are saying in this book, and really that's just the sort of clarity that proper reality-based world building can assure. And isn't that kind of cool? I mean, realistically, we know everything being said here is completely made up. But, well, I don't care, because the type of detail in this made-up environment makes the world feel just as real as ours. Okay, and I need some water now because I hate reading out loud. Bleh. But before we get to our last point, allow me to do a short list of smaller things that I liked about Wendig's article, but I just don't want to go into too much detail. No vampires. It's already been done. Do something else. No token imitators. It's already been done. Do something else. And don't over-explain things, please. I don't want to hear about how the oak trees in your forest drooled moss just because you think you're being profound by over-explaining everything. Just get to the sword fights, please. And lastly...
Knock it!
No. I was gonna say the names. You know? It's Lord of all creation, the names. Okay, just let me give you a short example to prove my point. This is the movie The Black Cauldron. This is our leading lady. And this is her name. Can you pronounce it? No? Well, there you go. Don't do this, people. I mean, there's nothing wrong with making up names, but please go with simple or at least phonetically understandable to a third grader. Unlike Elonwe, Elomi, this girl. You know, this is why you're not a Disney princess. Well, that and your movie totally bombed. Well, that's probably the only reason. Alright, last point. And it's pretty simple. When writing fantasy, it's easy to get lost in the sea of mapping out lands, magical powers, and new terminology that you just feel oh so clever for thinking of. But remember that within all that delicious world building, something actually has to happen in the world that you've created. And that ultimately means that you're telling a story. About a person. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that for a second, didn't you? Sure, worlds are cool and everything, but they're like the gravy. The thing that you dip that really good piece of chicken into. And if you haven't guessed already, your main character is the chicken. Spend just as much time on your character development than you do on your world development. Because there's nothing worse than getting a beautifully wrapped present with a saltine cracker inside. Why am I getting so many food jokes out of this topic? Think of your favorite books, your favorite TV shows. What kept you tuning in and turning the page? It wasn't to see what new type of plant or coin is going to be introduced next, was it? No, it was the characters. The people who live in and experience the world. Their struggles, their growth, their journey. Sure, everyone wants to have that rich world with the equally rich characters, but always remember that characters come first and foremost. Because I can forgive a lot of things, and I mean a lot, in a story, if I like the characters. So there you have it. There are a few of my thoughts on Chuck Wendig's thoughts on fantasy. I do intend to do more videos like this, you know, with writing tips and just stories in general, maybe even some reviews. But the key word there was intend. Yeah, intend. We'll see. So check out Chuck Wendig's article, the link is in the description, and yeah, just go out and make cool worlds and fill them with even cooler characters. Peace, everybody.